All right, it's recording.
Okay, welcome and thank you for attending our webinar. We are with California Deafblind Services, which is a federally funded technical assistance and training program. And we're really happy to have you here with us for our webinar called Intervenor Services, the role, the outcomes, and the training opportunities. I'm Janelle Dowling, the educational specialist. And this is Julie Meyer, our program coordinator with California Deafblind Services. And we can go to the next slide. So for our agenda today, Julie is going to share a lot of information with us and some great resources, defining the role of the intervenor, determining need for intervenor services, looking together at some tools for employing and supporting intervenors and some resources in that area. And the San Francisco State University California Deafblind Services Intervenor Training Program is one of the programs that we're going to look at together for training intervenors. Next slide. So Julie is going to answer some of these common questions. We've heard these questions from a lot of different families, administrators, educational team members, and we hear these questions over and over. So the information Julie's sharing today will help answer these questions. First, we hear a parent is asking for an intervenor. I've never heard of this position. Who is this person? Is intervenor part of IDEA? Is it a related service? Is it another term for an intervenor for a student with both vision and hearing loss? Can any paraeducator fill this role? How is an intervenor trained and who supervises a student's intervenor? How do I know if a student requires the services of an intervenor? And I'm going to hand it over to Julie Meyer now to share all of this wonderful information with us. Thanks, Julie.
Sure thing. Thank you, Janelle. So as Janelle said, we're going to dig in now, and hopefully by the end, you'll have answers to many of these questions. And if you're attending this webinar, after we watch this, you're going to have a chance to ask any other questions that you have that weren't answered. So first, let's talk about what is an intervenor. You've never heard of this, maybe. It's the term that's used in the field of deafblindness that describes the role of a one-on-one paraeducator who is serving a student that has both vision and hearing issues of any type of vision and hearing issues, but combined. Intervenors have engaged in specialized training in order to effectively meet the unique and complex needs of these students. So it's not just any paraeducator, it's an paraeducator who's received some specialized training. And the key thing to know about intervenors is they provide access, the access that that student requires to enable the implementation of their IEP and to encourage and promote their learning. So you may want to leave this webinar and have an additional resource. So throughout the slideshow, we have different resources we'll share. And the first one I want to show you is a wonderful document that was developed by the National Center on Deafblindness. And it's a 2-page, very easy handout that talks about many of the things that you'll hear me talking about today in terms of what roles an intervenor holds, the ways that they will team with other professionals on the team and the student's family, and the training that they require. So we've provided you with this slideshow and you will have the link, so you can go ahead, but this could be a great resource for you to share with other members of the team or other people in your district or colleagues in other districts. So that's resource number 1 that helps you understand what an intervenor is. So let's talk about that phrase that intervenors provide access. Personally, I think many times when people think of access, when it comes to school-age children, they think of access to the curriculum. But for learners who are deafblind, they require access to much more than just the materials and the instruction that's being provided. They also need access to language and access to communication because they are going to be communicating and expressing themselves in different ways. Some may use sign language, some may use spoken language, some may use alternative, all their alternate systems of communication, like picture symbols or objects or a device. They also require access in the environment to the visual and auditory information that sighted and hearing people easily acquire. And then finally, they need support and facilitation to have access to their peers and to other people in the environment. So the intervener acts as a bridge and provides that access in all of these areas. So why is intervention important? Why are you here? Why are families asking for this? Why should you care? You have to really understand the deafblind perspective and how different it is for a child that has either limited, missing, or distorted visual and auditory access. So intervention is a process that allows an individual who's deafblind to gather that visual and auditory information that they can't gather on their own in a way that's meaningful to that individual and enables them to engage and interact with their environment and people in that environment. So it's more than just providing things in larger print or in Braille. It's more than just providing an ASL interpreter. This is one way that an intervener is different than an educational interpreter. They're providing all the other visual information that's missing and any other auditory information in a very individualized way. On this slide, you see 8 photographs, and there's 2 lines of 4 photos. And I'll just describe them as I go across. The first top row is a young boy with an intervener who is greeting and petting a service dog. The next is a young child who's sitting in front of their intervener and they're working on an art project with shaving cream. The next is a young child who's standing by a table with plants and with an intervener looking closely at the plants. The next has a older student who's receiving hand under hand instruction from an intervener to understand his daily object calendar. The row below that starts with a young woman who's sitting in front of a keyboard with 2 different computer screens and who's completing a assignment in school with her intervener next to her. The next has another older student using a balance in a science class to complete an assignment with the intervener looking on. Next to that is a student who's navigating his campus, a middle school campus, with a white cane. So he's learning navigation skills from his intervener who's been trained in how to do that. And then finally, a student who's in an elective wood shop and his intervener is teaching him how to use a tool. And I show these photographs to help people understand how important this access is for these students. Because if that adult support person, that related service that they're receiving in these photos is not there, my question is, who is going to be providing that support? Will it be the classroom teacher who has 10 to 15 to perhaps 30 other students in the classroom? Will it be whatever para-educator is available at the time? Will it be the teacher of the deaf or the teacher of the visually impaired who comes in once a week? So if that adult support person isn't there, it's very likely that student might not be able to engage in working on these important IEP goals, advancing in their learning, advancing in their skills in so many areas. So interveners provide access and they perform a very important role, and as you can see, a very specialized role. There's many outcomes of interventions. I could list many more than this, but let's just look at these because these are important, and I think these would be something that you would value in your own school district or in your own county programs, seeing these outcomes for students. First, increased and improved language and communication. Higher levels of concept development. A heightened sense of personal identity and positive self-image. Friendships, positive relationships are promoted. increased independence and self-determination. Oftentimes, people think a one-to-one support person will decrease a student's independence. It's completely the opposite with a good intervener. A good intervener is helping a student become more skilled, more confident, more understanding of concepts in their environment, and able to do more things themselves. Increased access to and skills and confidence in participating in a variety of school and community settings, as I just illustrated with the photos on the last slide, and then improved quality of life for the student and family. So those are all such important outcomes that I'm certain that you would value for students that you're working with. Now, comparing an intervener to a paraprofessional, it is different. And these are some of the main differences. And the definition sheet, the resource I showed earlier, also highlights this. First, an intervener is assigned one-on-one to that student who's deafblind. So you won't be expecting them to work with a whole group of students or being assigned other duties, because then they're not able to always be attentive and provide the access on an ongoing basis. They are a professional who's engaged in some training specific to deafblindness and intervention. They communicate with the student in their mode of communication. So if that student uses sign language, it should be someone that has skills in that area. If that student uses picture symbols but does not use sign language, then it would be more important that they use that mode of communication. And they are also interpreting for other people what the student's behavior or modes of communication mean when necessary. For some students who use assistive technology, they will need to know how to use and care and maintain that technology and those devices. A big difference between typical paras is that they attend team planning meetings and IEP meetings. Their voice, their feedback is very important. And then finally, what's important for you to walk away from today is knowing that this is not a teacher. An intervener is working under the supervision of professionals that have a credential to serve a child who's deafblind. So they're working among the team. They should be getting training, supervision, feedback from professionals who have those credentials. So they're not replacing a credentialed teacher. So as you can see, this is a little bit different than a typical classroom aide. Interveners build this trusted relationship with the student through that one-on-one time that they spend together. They're very in tune with the student, and they know the student's vision and hearing access issues. So they're able to know how, when, and to interpret the environmental information. They're always encouraging exploration and independence. They are not doing things for the student. They are doing things together with the student. They're consistently supporting the development of communication by first providing access to language and auditory information, but also supporting skill development and how the student is communicating. And then in terms of whatever level of curriculum the student is engaged in, whether it's typical grade level curriculum or if it's adapted alternative curriculum, they are providing access to that curriculum at all levels. So implementing the materials and lessons that a teacher has developed and adapting them as needed. So now we're going to shift a little bit because I'm thinking about what your role is in the district as an administrator or someone who's helping to implement a program for a student. You might be thinking about, well, we don't have interveners in our district, so I don't even think we could do this. My HR department is not going to know what to do with this information. So again, here is a chance for you to learn about some resources, to engage in some discussions. We'd be happy to have some of these discussions with you as your technical assistance project. But the first thing that I would suggest is first to make sure that everybody understands what an intervener is, their role and their responsibilities. So all the different team members and perhaps different members of your administrative staff. So again, share information that you've learned here, share the resources about the definition for an intervener and some other tools I'll show you in a moment. And then the second part of that is ensuring that you're providing training on intervention practices to the interested paraeducators who want to take on the role of serving as an intervener. There's a sample job description that I want to show you. It's just a template that was again developed by the National Center on Deaf Blindness. And so it looked at how typically a job description is laid out and gave some suggestions for how the job, what it might be titled, a summary of what the job is, so including many of the things that I spoke about in terms of what their role is and their responsibilities and the reasons why they are needed. And then you get into qualifications. So as you can see, an intervener is someone that would have many of the same requirements of a paraeducator, but a key thing is they will have had completion of some intervener training. They also should be proficient in the mode of communication that the student uses. And then determined, California, as of today, does not have any specific certification. So, but if there does develop later, that could be added. And then you could have preferred a certificate or credential of some kind. And then it lists the different responsibilities, which I think could be something that would offset it from what a typical paraeducator job description look like. So, so that's another tool for you, which you have that link to. And then there's also some guidance that the National Center has provided us on thinking about intervener compensation. And I don't want to spend too much time on this webinar on this because you have this great handout to read, but it does talk about ways that you could think about offering compensation within, it gives some ideas about different pay rates and benefits. So thinking about if there's different classifications within your district, so different pay scales, maybe the person would be hired full-time versus part-time. Maybe there's a different raise level that they get if they've had some training. So that's another tool for you. And then finally, I wanted to let you know that there's a whole web page on the National Center just about tools that you can use to employ and support interveners. So you will see that there's basic information at the top, but then many of the other tools we've talked about and I will be talking about, and then the training. So this is a great web page to maybe bookmark and keep handy. So those are things to think about in terms of developing the role. And again, we'd be happy to chat with you or have some discussions. I've heard from administrators, program specialists that I've spoken to about whether or not this is recognized in IDEA or from the federal level. So it is not in IDEA as it is currently written from the 2004 reauthorization. In future reauthorizations, we hope that it will be. Because of that, I think it was 2017, the director of the National Center wrote to the Office of Special Education Programs Secretary and asked for clarification about whether an intervener could be regarded as a related service. And there's a link to the letter. The letter is also on that tools resources page that I just showed you. And in fact, what was written back was that if the IEP team determines that the student needs this service, then yes, intervener services can be included as a related service in an IEP. And if your district or county does not want to use the term intervener in the IEP, you could say a paraeducator providing intervener services or a paraeducator providing intervention and listed under related services. There is also congressional focus on providing interveners, which may also support any reauthorization in IDEA. And there is a proposed congressional act that has been brought forward in several subsequent or previous Congresses called the Anne Sullivan Macy Alice Cogswell Act. And there's 3 parts to the act, and each relate to a different low incidence sensory disability area. There is one that is specific to deaf blindness, and it includes the recognition of and training for interveners. So the language is there that a student who is deafblind will be served by qualified staff that include a teacher of the deaf-blind, and an intervener when determined by the student's IEP team. And then finally, I'll just note that the Office of Special Education Programs has, from the U.S. Department of Education, has included training of interveners as one of their grant initiatives for several cycles now. So they expect state deaf-blind projects to be promoting this role and helping to train individuals to serve in this role so that there are enough trained interveners. One of the questions was, how do I figure out if this student needs an intervener? So this is one of the last things I'll show you before we talk about training. There's a terrific tool that's been developed. It's called Are Intervener Services Appropriate for Your Student Who's Deaf-Blind? It was recently updated in 2023. And so this is what it looks like, and you have the link. And I will show you on the next slide how it's broken up. This tool allows an IEP team to develop, to evaluate the student's vision and hearing and access and support needs in terms of looking at any residual hearing and vision that the student can use, their access to information, how are they able to access communication, what is their access to trusted relationships and social interactions, and their access to concept development, to concepts. So this is the order of using the tool. First, the team spends time understanding what an intervener does, which we're doing now. Next, they identify a team member that has deaf-blind expertise. So in California, that could be a teacher of the deaf, hard of hearing. It could be a teacher of the visually impaired, or it could be a special education teacher of extensive support needs. They all have a credential. However, they may not have had direct experience working with a student who's deaf-blind or gotten a lot of pre-service training. So if you don't have someone on the team that does have some expertise, again, reach out to us, and we've been happy to help teams with this IEP team discussion. Then you review student evaluation data to answer questions in those 6 areas that I just spoke about. After you gather that data, so this is a very data-driven decision-making process. You summarize what you've learned from the data, you have a discussion, and then you make your decision. And you have a rationale now that's based on data that you can talk about how you came to this decision. So I'd like to show you, again, that tool. And we're not going to go through all of it. We don't have time, but just to show you how simple it is to use a page of it. So when we're talking about residual vision, you can just check mark, whether it's true or not true. So I filled this one out just to give you an example. And then you answer some more questions about vision. You do the same for hearing. And then there's pages where you start to talk about access to information and to relationships and to concepts and to communication. And all of these would be blank. I'll show you the next page. But I filled this in just so you can see. If you have a student that has these characteristics, you just check the box, and then you have a space to type in. So it's a document that you can type right into. This is the kind of data, this is the kind of information you'll use for that discussion to build that rationale of how you came to a decision whether or not the student needs an intervener. So that's just to give you a taste of it. You will need to dive into it more on your own. All right. I also wanted to let you know that the Council for Exceptional Children, just as they have for all special education teachers in all areas, has developed competencies for interveners. And there's based on 7 different strands of knowledge and skills and all of them are listed on this slide. And these are specific to what you see in each of the other teacher specialty areas. But I wanted to show you quickly this link, which is at the top of that last slide page. This is where you can go ahead and look at all the different competencies that have been developed. And when you look at these, and there's over 70, when you look at these, you'll realize how this is a very specialized role in terms of a paraeducator skill and better understand why training is needed. So again, if you go to the slideshow and you click on this link, that will take you to seeing that set of competencies. So any training program that's training individuals to serve in this role should be following those different competencies and ensuring that the paraeducators are gaining that knowledge and developing that skill set. So let me tell you a little bit about training opportunities. California Deafblind Services, Janelle and I are the instructors. We offer an online course through San Francisco State University, and it's through the College of Professional and Global Education, and they have been very collaborative and also very generous in terms of the cost for this program, because it's a professional level certificate program. So there are 2 semesters. The cohort always starts in the fall. So the next cohort will be starting at the end of August 2024. They complete that 16-week course, and then they take a spring course. It's all online. It's asynchronous. So they do have due dates in terms of completing each of the 5 modules they do each semester within 3 weeks, but within that 3 weeks, they have as much time as they want to take to complete the work. Each module takes anywhere from 7 to 9 hours to complete, so it's about 2.5 to 3 hours of work per week. We also have 4 synchronous video conference group meetings, so we have little Zoom classes 4 times a semester where they meet with other paraeducators and intervener candidates who are in the class, and that's always a great chance for them to connect and have discussion. And if they complete both courses successfully, they will receive a intervener program certificate from a California State University. And this demonstrates that they have received training in deafblind intervention and have knowledge and skills to serve in this role. Additionally, any participants who are interested can ask for coaching that we can provide, or a local teacher mentor who lives in your area could provide upon request. And that will be either virtual coaching or perhaps some on-site opportunities to come and see this candidate then using some of the skills that they've learned in the training with the student they're working with. Many of the people who have taken this training course in the past, we've had 6 cohorts, have been working with a student who's deafblind while they're in the course. So they're being trained as they're working with a student. We've also had a small number of people who are interested in the role who are not currently working with a student who's deafblind, but want to do that in the future. And then we are able to provide some opportunities for them to use and practice some of those skills. The cost for each course is $240, so it's $480 for both courses. So under $500 for a great deal of high quality professional development. So we think it's a really reasonable cost for this level of training. These are the websites to the programs. So here is the San Francisco State Deafblind Education website. There's a brochure, a flyer where they can learn more. It's essentially what we've shared here. And then here is where they can sign up for the class. We also have on our California Deafblind Services page a whole page dedicated to interveners. Again, more information is shared, but you can quickly click to the SFSU program. You can also share, there's a video that you could share with interested people so they could learn more about it. Okay. Additionally, there are other training pathways. I did want you to be aware. If you're working with someone who's interested in a national intervener credential, that's offered through Central Michigan University and Utah State. They are more comprehensive programs. They include more classes. There's a fieldwork component. There's a electronic portfolio component, and it's more costly because of that. But if you have someone who's looking to have a credential that would allow them to be an intervener in any state in the United States, this might be a pathway that they would want to follow. Finally, just the last two resources are the one that I showed you earlier about the tools to employ and support interveners from the National Center, and then our page on interveners, which is consistently being updated with new information. And I believe we have reached the end of our presentation. So thank you very much for attending.